Hey guys, welcome back to this tutorial. We're into part 3 now, and we'll be looking into view. We'll be starting to bring our world machine terrain into view, doing ecosystem, populations, materials, atmosphere setups, the ocean, separating the mountains from the fields and grass so we can access the materials separately, and working in that. So we'll be doing the basics to start with, and then part 4 will be advanced techniques. So here's, I thought I should show you the image just one more time, and here is the current version as it is. This is the final version. This section through the middle here is what the final render is going to look like, which is still off computing. I'm getting other renders out of the way at the moment. So we've got our sky replacement in the background, just a really standard photograph. It's dumb as anything to do it really. We have a different. You'll notice in a moment when I show you, you'll see the ocean renders differently in this in the image than it looks like in here. So I'll be showing you how I've done that as well to make it a little bit more of a defined horizon. We've also got a different plane here for our river, so you can see the difference in the two water materials. And we've got a really nice distribution with stratum coming through on our mountain side. Now typically, if you're a map painter, you'll probably just say, yeah, forget about that, I'll just use photographs. But this is a quick little job, but you could do a lot better job with a little bit of studying on texturing and or rather photography of mountainsides. We have a fog layer through here, which is rendered in view. It's actually two different atmospheres that I've used for it. So, and then I've just composited that inside of Photoshop. And that's pretty much about it. So we'll get into the scene. Firstly, we're going to look at importing our object. So most of the tutorial will be focusing on our this finished scene here, which I've got. This is the scene that is included, and you can have a look at it to your heart's content. And we'll be looking through this mainly because of the little idiosyncrasies inside view, because of all the fractals that it handles. Can be you can end up with very different results. They'll be the same in theme, but different in visual. So I'm going to stick with the same one and show you just exactly how I've put it together. So to get our terrain from World Machine into view, we've saved out the height map, saved out the texture, and it's time to put these images into the height map image, that is, into view. So here I've got my my terrain, and it's just a standard terrain. We'll double click it to open up the editor. You can increase the resolution if you want, but I'm going to stay at 1K just for speed of rendering. Click on this icon down here, and we've got a picture point. We can open up a picture, navigate to your file, click this to open. I've got my texture file here and my height map file here, and that's at 4K, but it'll be downsampled. So press OK, loads it in. We'll change the proportions to 100% on the picture, press OK, and voila, we have our terrain there. We'll press OK again, and before doing anything with the terrain, what you want to do is load in your image, because and get the proportions right, because if you resize or such, sometimes the images can come in not quite correct. You can end up with trying to line up images and scales, and it's just a whole mess. So edit the material, come to mapped picture. Most of the time it'll be on procedural, so you want mapped picture, then click on load picture, find your texture, press OK, and when we come into our terrain, I'll just change our lighting so we can see it a little bit better. And I'll also just decrease it. There we go. Now, when we look at our terrain, there's something really wrong, and that is that this is our river over here, and we have our texture over here. So in this case, it's just a matter of rotating the texture. So we just click this button here, rotate once, rotate twice, and if I render that now, it's spot on. So it's perfect. Sometimes you'll find that you have to invert or flip images vertically or horizontally. It really doesn't matter as long as it's one or the other, in order to get it to line up. So if you've got the river here, but this is on the left side, or you know, the details seem lined up but not, then try flipping your image inside an external image viewer. So that's all we're going to do with this texture. We're not actually going to use it. We're going to use it as reference. Well, it's good to use as reference, but we're not going to use it in our final image. We're going to come down here, line up our terrain. We're actually going to scale this up too because it's way too flat. So I'm going to bring this right up. Probably a little bit too much. That'll do there. And we'll also drop down a C plane, and we're going to bring that up. What we want to do is bring it up so that it intersects with our river but doesn't intersect with our terrain, so we don't get any parts through here. Now what you can do is you can actually paint in specific areas, so you can raise this area. For instance, this is the first area that gets the water, so if it's there, I can double click on my terrain, and if I click on show elements, you can see, whoa, there we go, see these little, that little section there, that's showing that the water plane has clipped through our terrain. So if we just go and paint this up, there we go, those have been raised. Another thing I want to do is this point here is a little bit too high, so I'm going to invert my brush and just lower it down a little bit, because if you look down here in the image, that there is that ridge, and that's going to disappear now when I press OK. You see how it got lowered. So that can be useful as well, just to tweak certain portions of your image towards the end, instead of having to go into World Machine and battle through with something. Alright, so I'm going to place my my sun around in the correct alignment. I want long shadows to come across the image, so I'm just looking inside here to see where my shadows are occurring, and I want them to sort of streak across just like that. So I've got these shadows through here. You see that spike, and that's going to create really nice soft shadows through our grass that we'll create later. In fact, I'll probably just lift it up a bit. So a little bit too extreme. And that's a bit better. Don't want them to come all the way across, because it'll make our scene just way too dark. Okay, so next what we want to do, and shortly after we'll be moving back to our other terrain, but what we want to do is change our terrain material to a mixed material of grass and snow. And the reason we want to do that is we want to separate this top section of mountain from the bottom section of grass and trees. That way we can specifically work on each area before, like, instead of trying to control the entire thing through one material. So switch the default mixed material to default simple material to a mixed material, And in the second, if I show you the materials to mix, in the second material we want to load up the snow material. And initially it's just going to mix the two, so we want to go to influence of environment, check it, make the material 2 appear at higher altitudes, 100% strong, and we'll try that. We just got to adjust the mixing ratio to get rid of the snow off the bottom of the terrain. And that'll probably do. If I move, you can use the influence of slope as well, so that the snow appears on steeper or flatter, depending on what you want. Alright, so if I'm to render that now, you'll see this. We've got the snow nicely appearing up the top and just down into the bottom edges of our snow, of our mountains over on the left. We do have a little bit through here, but it's not to worry. We can tweak that later if it becomes a problem, which it really shouldn't. Okay, so that's us done for this section, and we're going to go back to our other terrain, and I'll show you the same thing again. I've got the snow material. I've just highlighted these, so we've got grass materials are green, the snow is up the top there on the left. And alright, come on, stop that. Alright, in our terrain material, it'll look extremely complicated if you're not used to multi-layer materials, because this is the entire material. But when I collapse it down, it's actually quite simple. We've got the top layer is just the entire material as a whole. Then underneath that we've got a ecosystem and another ecosystem, and these are just trees on top of the textures that we've got. Then we have our mountain fields mix, which is what I was just showing you in the other scene, creating the snow, and that's the mountain, and then the fields, which is the lower part. Now within that is our two materials, but instead of just being simple materials, these are also mixed materials. So for the fields, I've just got a base, which is the texture, plus an ecosystem on top. So the fields looks like this. If I show you, there's the base, and then on top of the base is a grass object which gets populated. That way, what happens to this grass is, instead of being populated everywhere, it's restricted to that lower section wherever the fields are. So in the Presence tab, this is where we control where our grass grows. This will, even though it's up to 1.0, normally that would mean that it would grow all the way from here right down to here, and all the heights in between. But because our field material is restricted to this lower section through here, the grass is only ever going to populate inside that area and will leave this top mountain range, it will leave that alone. So there's the fields, and then we have our mountains, which is the top side, so it's the invert of that. And this, everything within here controls the texture of the top part of the top section, which is anything above this line. What I've done is I've split upper mountains from lower mountains, and the reason I did this was that I wanted snow, like a snowy fir tree up the top, and I wanted sort of scattered fir trees up here. But then I also wanted on the lower part of the mountain, I wanted other trees which were greener pine trees to mix better with the lower pine trees as well. So we've got upper mountain layer, and this is obviously a mixed one as well, and then the lower mountains as well. So on the lower mountains we've just got a simple fir tree which has a presence applied to it and a material. So, and then in the upper mountain, we've got the snow with a fir tree on top of it. And these two are mixed with a distribution which I'll show you in just a moment. We've got a rotation node as well to give us that nice rotated stratum which is coming. You can see it down there. If I just zoom in on that, you can see these sections through here are our that's what our rotation is creating. Okay, so let's get started on figuring out exactly how we'll tackle this. We've got the city to do over on the right. We've got this river bed to do with a different material to the ocean. We've got the lighting, the sunlight, which you can choose wherever you want it to come from. You'll just have to make sure that you've got an image that will match up with the angle of the light. And then we also have our grass and trees in this lower section, our river trees around the edge. We've got lower mountain trees and upper snow mountain trees. And for the most part, in this lower section, we have so many trees and plants that everything's being covered, so it's not an issue to have a very good base texture. Whereas for this left side, we have to really work on it. So first I'm going to cover this mountain, creating the mountain texture. We're going to ignore the fir trees for the moment and all the ecosystem. We're just going to work on creating that material. So I really wish that the material editor was better inside View, so apologies for the tiny size. You can always open it up yourself and have a look through the material list. So inside our field and mountain mix, select the simple material, which it will be a simple material, and click mixed material, and that will give you a mixed material of snow, and you can load up a rock material inside that. And then, so you've got a snow material and a rock material, and what we want to do is we want to control the distribution of the two by two things. We want, one, the influence of environment, but we also want to break the influence of environment up with a distribution. So if I just copy this function, and I'll show you what it looks like. Just check that everything is optimized so that it's not going to take too long for you. And I'll just do a portion render, and we're going to be able to compare them. This is the section as it is in the finished product. And if I come back down and I'll remove in this upper mountain we're looking at, and I'll reset that, and I'll show you the difference. Okay, so there's quite a clear difference, and this distribution is actually quite nice because we've got the steeper the slope is, the less snow there is on it, and what's occurring there is the influence of environment. Got no influence of altitude, but material 2 appears on steep slopes, and that's 100% strong, and material 2 is our rock. So you can clearly see it here and there, and this can be really good. You could render this and mix it with our previous option to get a more realistic result. But in order to break this up, you can use the different mixing methods here, but the distribution of materials will add it's like adding an alpha to the two. It just adds another layer. So what I've done here is I've added a grainy fractal. So what I actually did was just load up a function, go to the grainy fractal here, and initially what that will do is just create horizontal lines which stand out like hell, and we don't really want that, even though it would look nice in some areas if we could mix it with the two, and you can certainly do that, but it gets a little bit too complicated for the purposes of this tutorial. We'll edit the function, and we're going to add a filter. I think it's filter. No, it's not. It's a math node, and we want vector operation, rotation and twist. So the math node is there. Come down to vector operations, rotation and twist. So we'll connect that up, and we'll move the connection from the grainy fractal to the rotation and twist, and nothing happens because we first have to go and edit it. And you can play around with the twist if you want. That'll twist it as it goes. It'll twist it by a certain degree as it moves. Sorry, as the X to Z, it'll twist by 44 degrees at that setting. So it can get you an alright effect, but what we want is the rotations, because typically the stratum will come out at an angle after something like an earthquake reveals the sedimentary rock. So let's take the X to about 15, and we'll just, well, let's just see what that gives us there. And you can already see actually in this preview, I don't even have to render the image, you can see the effect that it's given. Now if I do, this is X, which means be careful on that, because if you do Y at the same amount, like 15 degrees, you can sometimes end up with really silly looking terrains. So in this circumstance, it hasn't looked too bad, but you can see the difference there. So play around with the rotation and twist in terms of your scene. It can require a little bit of work to get right, but it also depends on the angle that you're looking at your mountain from. So as you can see, that we've got huge angle of almost 40 degrees or something, affecting that through there. We may also want to change the distribution scale. So 0.2 will squash it up a little bit. Actually go to sorry, it'll do the opposite. So if I paste in my old function in there, and then we go back to, so I'll just show you the settings for you. So I went to 15 degrees and left the rest at 0. Okay, so that is our snow and rock mix done, and we'll leave the trees till later again. We've got one section of our mountain, which is the upper mountain, and now we want the lower part of the mountain to have more rock on it than in the upper. So if I come to this, let's render again. The green is our upper mountain, which we had before, and the pink is the lower portion. Now the main reason for this lower portion is not for the texture, so the color, but it's more for the fir trees, because what we want is those lower altitude trees to sort of come up into the snow but not have snow on them. So if I just let's just bump this up to 2500, and you'll see here there's clearly a altitude constraint on the pink. There is no pink material appearing above that line, and as we come down the slope, we get more and more of the pink material. So that means that the fir trees are only ever going to appear on these pink areas. So to do that, you come to the layer above, our mountains and fields layer, and we've got our mix here. I've just added in one of the basic noises. I think it was crystals or granite, and I just changed the scales within this function. And this was just to give it a bit of noise, so I didn't have a constant replacement. And we've got, so in the influence of altitude, we want our second material to appear at lower altitudes on steeper slopes as well, because it is rock. We don't want to replace too much of the snow. So we've got 54% strength on lower altitudes, and steep slopes material 2 again are the rocks on the steeper slopes, but not too much on the strength. And you can play around with the mixing materials as well. If you want a little bit more on the lower, we can move it to the right, move it to the left to tweak that. Okay, so we've got our mountain texture done. What we want to do now is put some trees on it. So we come into our upper mountains. We'll start on our upper mountains first, and we've got our mixed materials, and we want our fir trees with snow on them to only appear on the higher, on the snow portions of the terrain, not on the rock. So if you want to grab this fir winter tree object, it's actually in one of the ecosystems which come with view. Material, no, not material layers. It's ecosystems, maybe under ecosystem layers. It'll be on the DVD as well, so you can just load up the you can just load in that tree. But essentially, what all it is the fir tree with one of the textures, one of the leaf textures edited. So I don't believe they are in here. I'll show you that quickly if I can find it. We have ecosystem materials, fir tree, snowy. There we go. So it's a mixed material, and one of the materials has just been changed to an overall color with white, so it's blended with white. So if you turn that off, it goes pink for some reason, probably because of that. There you go. So someone's changed the overall color as well. So it's just blended with a white color, really easy to do, and you can do all sorts of stuff with that. So in our material, come down to the snow, add an ecosystem on top, and initially what I generally do is I turn up the overall scaling to something really big so that I can see just where the instances are appearing. So probably 3 was a bit too much, but that's pretty good. 1 for the moment, so I can see them appearing. They're going to appear inside that top little section, down on these flatter sections as well. Now in the Presence tab, I've done this to control the altitude constraint, and now this is by the object. Now if I go maximum on both ends, it's not actually going to appear all the way down here. It's just going to appear wherever the material, its base material, is. So that's actually fine for what we need. And the slope constraint I've moved down so they don't quite appear on our steepest slopes. Let's just decrease the scale and see. I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So obviously these trees are way too big. You can only just see them out there and sort of covering the mountain. If I switch between, I'll delete all these. and you can see these white areas here being filled in by speckled green and white. And another thing I really like about having the trees is they tend to catch the light through areas like this. If you see through here, there's a bit of that light being caught in there instead of just literally just plain shadow. Okay, so for the most part that's these trees done. I've kept the overall density down low because we don't want to overpower the mountains up there. We just want to keep them sort of scattered throughout. I just cancelled that, and so I have my old settings. Next thing what we want to do is set up the lower mountain fir trees. So again, same process except this time just adding the young fir tree and a scale of 0.1. Similar density, but probably actually even a little bit higher than 70% because we want them to be more than the previous, because we want the density as it goes down to increase towards the bottom. Decay near foreign objects. Now, I've put this on here and I'll demonstrate it later because we want these trees to not to grow near the other ones. Now, we don't want it to be too the intensity to be too strong because they won't grow at all. But having it on just increases a little bit of that natural sort of effect that the computer can take over and calculate where it's really going to place them. Changing the maximum size variation 1.4, you can probably might be better to leave that at 1 and change the proportions so that they just come up. Thinks it's doing there. Okay, I wanted to save the file. In the Presence tab, back down to here, it's decided to go to absolutes as well, which is strange. But again, it doesn't matter for this because I'll just clear our previous one, change our scaling up, and again, when it populates, it is going to populate through the whole range because there is no limit on this. This lower mountain mix is actually appearing at the top as well because we haven't used 100% strength. But nevertheless, that's when we come into the presence here, bring this down and bring that up, see where they appear now. So that's almost perfect. I don't want them around here, but that's not too much of an issue. And again, slope range down to 80%, 80 degrees rather, which is probably quite a lot because 90 degrees is essentially a cliff face. They'll grow off a cliff face, and that's not exactly realistic. Probably in terms of a hill like that, a pine tree would be happy on about 70 degrees, or maybe to 80 degrees. And that's that one done. So we're happy with that. And what we've done is we've completely set up our mountain material. That entire area is now complete. So we'll probably leave it there. Actually, what we'll do before we leave it there, in the next part I'll be looking at the main distribution of plants through here, but because there's some other function editor stuff that we'll be getting stuck into there. But initially what we want to do is set up our river plane through here, our river water system and material. So we have our ocean, which has a material on it, but it's typically the water surface for the ocean, like with the waves and such, which a river is not going to have waves going in any particular direction. It's just generally dirty flowing water or clean flowing water. So what I've done is I placed an extra plane on top. So to do that is I just copy that material, delete the plane, come to the primitives, add a plane, zoom in, scale it up a bit, move across, and we're just putting it so that it intersects with that area. We don't want it to come too far out, we want it sort of mixing around there. And to get it just above the water, well, actually we don't really need to, we just raise it up until we see it intersecting with the top of our river. So probably right about there, and we'd be happy with that. And what I've done is actually loaded up a standard water preset from the material library. So we come up here, view. View is being a pain for some reason. That is very strange. Okay, in the liquids, if I can find it, here it is. I've loaded up the dark water or Shasta water. They're both pretty good. The only thing I don't like about the darker water is the bumps on it. So load up the Shasta water and change the highlights to a much higher intensity and much higher shininess, because typically water is a lot more specular than the defaults, which are down around, I think around here. And if we zoom in on that, it's going to take way too long, so I'm not going to. I've also increased the anisotropic highlighting, which just stretches these highlights out. That just gives us more highlights to look at when it's rendered. I didn't enable any displacement mapping because there was a problem with having the sea plane underneath and then a plane on top, which was also transparent, and also for our purposes we really didn't need it. So in the transparency tab, enable physical transparency if you're working on view 10. If you're working in view 9 you won't have that, but you'll be able to probably get something very, very close to this. We can leave all that alone, that's the defaults. Turn reflective with angle I have turned up to 80%, but anywhere between 40 and 80% will look realistic. 80% will just tend to reflect more of the sky as you go away. The anisotropy will also change the highlighting that comes through and where the light is reflected towards. It may not make much of a difference. It makes a huge difference when your camera is underneath the water, but not so much of a change on top. And the depth will depend on how much of the underlying terrain do you want to see. So if I move this down to here and click render, you can see the coastline or the river edge here. You can only just see through that section right there, and it literally disappears very quickly. So if you want it a little bit clearer, you can increase the depth maybe to, let's try 17 meters, and there you go, you've got this nicer gradient through there, well, a more even gradient. So that's our plane set up for our river water, and there is an issue with the distance where it intersects with our ocean, but just over here. But in Photoshop we'll just paint that out and get rid of that. Okay, so that's part 3 done, and we'll come back for part 4, where we'll be doing the distribution of our pine trees in the center, and also the grass. So what we'll be doing is actually using a fractal to control the pine trees, and then the grass ecosystem will be using repulsion from layer and decay near foreign objects to control where the grasses appear as well. So that's it for now.